Good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this GBEP webinar, which is the first in a series of webinars on biogas for 2021. Now, Michela Morese will give an overview of the webinar and a brief introduction to GBEP.
Here we are. A very brief overview regarding this series of events. As you know, and as I've just mentioned, so this one is the first one. We will have our colleague from the GBEP Secretariat, Constance Miller, giving an overview of the reports that I just mentioned, the regional perspectives on biogas, and then our colleagues Oscar and Ana Maria giving an overview of opportunities and challenges for biogas in Colombia. And then we will have some time for a question and answer. While you will hear presentations, you can also already start inserting your questions in the chat box. So just to give you also a background and the context of this webinar, as you may know, this event, this series of webinars are organized by the Global Bioenergy Partnership, which is an international initiative focused on strengthening the sustainable development of bioenergy. This initiative is formed by more than 80 members between partners and observers, between governments and international organizations, those that you may see on the screen on the slide. Since the establishment of the partnership, sustainability has always been considered key, essential, because we know that bioenergy presents excellent opportunities, but also challenges that have to be faced in order and addressed in order to take out the best from the opportunities of bioenergy. And in this context, the Global Bioenergy Partnership has developed what we consider the most widely recognized and agreed set of indicators to assess and monitor the environmental, social, and economic performances of a bioenergy production and use. This is the set of 24 sustainability indicators that were developed by the Global Bioenergy Partnership. And as you may see, there are 8 under each of the 3 pillars of sustainable development, with a view to give a strong political message that sustainable development can only be achieved if equal importance is given to the 3 pillars of sustainable development. These indicators were agreed in order to facilitate the collection of data regarding the performances, environmental, social, and economic performances of bioenergy value chain in a country, and then use those data to inform policymakers in order for them to take informed decisions. And even more, if measured over time, they could give to policymakers additional information regarding how to further adjust the national policies in order to further facilitate a sustainable development of bioenergy. It's also important to highlight that in the context of the partnership, we do have mainly a task force focusing on sustainability, currently working still on the development of further tools that could further facilitate the measurement of these indicators. And on the other side, we have a working group on capacity building, and the activity group number 7 is the one focused specifically on biogas. And it's in the context of this activity group that these webinars, this series of webinars are organized. Well, I would like to invite Connie, Anna, and Oscar, if they wish, to put up their screen so that the participants could see them. Hello and welcome. And I would now like to give the floor to my colleague, Constance Miller from the GBEP Secretariat, to give an overview of the regional perspectives on biogas in light of the GBEP SWOT analysis. Connie, over to you.
Thanks very much, Michela. Can you let me know if you can hear me okay and see my screen?
Absolutely, yes.
Perfect. Okay, well, thanks very much for the introduction, and it's lovely to be here today and share these experiences of the research that we did as part of the GBEP Secretariat, presenting some of the key findings from the GBEP research on regional biogas opportunities and challenges. Today, I'm going to give a brief overview of some of the key findings from that research and also what conclusions we can draw from those results. First, I'd just like to give a bit of context to GBEP's work on biogas. Obviously, biogas and anaerobic digestion is a flexible renewable energy option, modern bioenergy option, and it can be produced at different scales and from a variety of feedstocks. From that point of view, it's multifunctional, so it can contribute to both directly and indirectly. Obviously, the first one that comes to mind is SDG number 7 on affordable and clean energy, but there's also a number of other ones that it can contribute. Just a few examples: SDG number 1 on poverty, for example, through livelihood improvements arising from the availability of modern energy services, or through increased number of jobs, and also through the use and sale of the byproduct of anaerobic digestion or digestate. SDG 11, sustainable cities and communities, which wouldn't necessarily come immediately to mind, but through the treatment of wastes and the reduction in household air pollution, biogas could contribute to this. And then one of the more obvious ones, SDG 13 on climate action, through reductions in the methane emissions from untreated wastes and also in the replacement of fossil fuels. And not only the SDGs, but also anaerobic digestion, with its potential to produce energy from waste streams, also is going to be really important to reach net zero by 2050. In fact, in the IEA scenario recently published, 60 exajoules of energy will need to be produced from waste sources by 2050 to meet this net zero goal, and anaerobic digestion can definitely contribute to that. But even though anaerobic digestion is an established technology with many benefits, its uptake has been slow in many regions. And so therefore the aims of the GBEP work on biogas are really to understand what are the sustainable value chains for food and energy security in different contexts, demonstrate what are the effective systems, their challenges and also their opportunities, and then also understand the perceptions of stakeholders on the factors that are important for success of biogas value chains at a range of scales. The research that we carried out used SWOT analysis. I'm not going to go through this in too much detail because I know that many people will already be aware of this type of analysis, but basically it looks at both the internal and the external positive and negative aspects of that contribute to the success or the failure of a certain business model or value chain. So the strengths, the weaknesses being the internal aspects, and the opportunities and threats being the external aspects. Just to give you a bit of an overview of the methodology that we used for this research. So the research was carried out in 3 regions in conjunction with the GBEP Bioenergy Weeks, which are a capacity building initiative held each year in a different region of the world. So the African, in Ghana in 2017, we carried out the research on Africa, then Argentina in 2018 for Latin American Caribbean, and then Manila in 2019 for the research on Asia. The factors for the SWOT analysis were identified via interviews with key experts and also from secondary research. And then we used surveys to rank the factors by importance. Obviously, biogas being a very flexible technology, it has a variety of scales and different applications. And so these scales were dealt with separately for each of the regions.
So I'm going to go touch on some of the results just from Africa and Latin America and the Caribbean today in this presentation. But obviously, if you're interested in the more detailed findings of the research, I've put the link to the reports at the end of this presentation, and the presentation will be posted online and sent to all registered participants. So you're welcome to go and look at that after the webinar. But today I really wanted to draw attention to some of the key factors that we identified so that we could talk about some of the conclusions for that for a discussion. So for Africa, the research was carried out as part of the Bioenergy Week in Ghana in 2017. And the factors that you see here for large-scale biogas were actually identified by participants during an interactive session at that event. I'm not going to go into too much detail here. There were many factors, as you can see, but I want to point out a few important factors that were identified at this larger scale that can really tie into what I presented in the first slide about the contribution of anaerobic digestion to the achievement of the SDGs. For example, some of the factors that were identified were improved community sanitation, and this obviously with the consequent improvements in health. So this is SDG 3 and also SDG 6 on improved water and sanitation. Then you have some of the other factors: increased soil quality through the application of digestate, could be SDG 15 for life on land. And then also creating local value chains, SDG 8 in terms of decent work. So these are just some of the factors that were identified at that scale. The factors for the large scale were not ranked, as this was done during the event itself, but actually for the small scale, we carried out a survey in order to be able to rank the importance of the factors that were identified. And here instead, I would like to focus on some of the key negative factors that were ranked highly, so the weaknesses and the threats. And I think this might give us quite a good insight for a discussion on what is needed in the future. So you can see here that some of the key weaknesses and threats were the high initial capital requirements of biogas, both in terms of the digester, the construction of the digester, but also the related cooking appliances that are required. We have also, as a threat, the lack of financing due to the lack of knowledge of financial institutions, lack of technical knowledge, and also another threat being the comparative costs of other feeds. So for example, the low costs of fossil fuel, LPG, for example, or wood fuel. And I'm going to get on to what conclusions we can draw from some of these factors towards the end of the presentation. So now Latin America and the Caribbean, and here the two scales were separated into household level and productive use level. So again, I don't want to go into all of these factors. As you can see, it's a very long list, but just to highlight here at household level, you can see some of the SWOT here. Factors at the household level were very similar to those found in the African region, with the addition of a few ones that were not addressed in that SWOT analysis. For example, the problem of climatic conditions in some countries due to seasonal variations in temperature. Also the lack of national value chains that provide biogas products and also services. Even though one of the opportunities was that there was the availability of local materials for construction, for example. And then here we can see the results of the SWOT for the productive use level. And here again, I'd just like to pick out a few key points that maybe I haven't mentioned for some of the other SWOT analyses. Here you can see that the top threat there is the incompatibility of animal husbandry. And this is a threat that was kind of across the board in all regions, that potentially where there was no stabling of animals, it's very difficult to collect the waste streams. Another threat was subsidies for alternative fuels, for fossil fuels specifically, and also the low cost of electricity in some countries, making biogas not a competitive option. But there is this opportunity due to the alignment of the benefits of biogas with many international commitments, as I mentioned before, the Paris Agreement, the Net Zero by 2050 SDGs. So obviously the opportunities are there. It's just matching them together. And finally, I just want to I guess shows the results of the case study survey that we conducted in Argentina in conjunction with the Bioenergy Week in 2018. And here, rather than picking out the key factors, some of the most specific factors, I wanted to use these results to highlight a key trend that we found a lot in this research. And that was that the highest ranked positive factors from the SWOT, the strengths and the opportunities, were usually environmental in nature, related to the positive impacts to the environment from switching to this renewable energy. However, most of the negative factors, so the weaknesses and the threats, were related to economic problems, such as subsidies for competitive fuels or high costs, and also the lack of understanding in the financial community to provide investment security. So one of the key questions which I would like to come back to at the end of my presentation and also potentially discuss is I think how we can ask ourselves, how do we bring these two sides closer together and align the environmental benefits with the economics? So I'll just present a few of the conclusions and what we can draw from those. So although we've talked a lot about biogas as a modern renewable energy, in many cases, it's actually, we found that it was the co-benefits that arise from the switch to biogas that drive its take. So the examples of these co-benefits are the ability to use residues or waste streams as feedstock, substitution of traditional biomass or fossil fuels, improved waste disposal or sanitation, and also the use of digestate as fertilizer, either to increase crop yields or reduce the use of chemical fertilizer in some cases. Secondly, at all scales and in all regions, we found that the high initial investment for anaerobic digesters for biogas production is a weakness that prevents uptake of this technology. This is both for households looking to buy small digesters, as well as industry investing in large-scale biogas plants with upgrading or power generation potential. And although the problem is the same, the solution at the different scales across the various regions could be very different. Examples of solutions could be microfinance at the household level or feed-in tariffs at larger scales. Thirdly, another common difficulty identified across the regions is the problem of adapting biogas technology that has been designed in another region to the local circumstances. Obviously, the knowledge of anaerobic digesters construction and operation continues to grow in many regions, and this alleviates the problem. But capacity building and training, both formal and informal, are needed to overcome this. And finally, to overcome some of the hurdles to biogas development that were identified, solid policies are required. And I know this can sound very trivial to say, but actually in general, robust policies dedicated to biogas are not present in some of these countries. However, examples exist of policies that are successfully promoting biogas, both at small and large scale, and I'll get onto some of those now. So there we go. So what is needed? And here I've used the carrot and stick analogy, being the supportive carrot and the regulatory stick. So for carrot policies, economic recognition is needed of the positive externalities of biogas through policies that promote the circular bioeconomy. So examples of these could be subsidies, tax exemptions to imports of materials, power purchase agreements, feed-in tariffs, and guarantees for investment. And then in terms of the regulatory sticks, indirectly, they can incentivize the uptake of biogas through, for example, regulations on waste treatment. I also mentioned carbon markets here and carbon tax, and this works in both senses, in that dirty industry, let's say, is taxed, and that money can then be used for investments in biogas, for example. So what else is needed? These policies that I've just discussed in the previous slide, they need to be clear and long-term in order to create a stable investment environment for biogas. This is one of the key conclusions that came out from the research. Also, given the policy, the problems that we've identified, a key conclusion was that there is a need to develop national and local value chains for biogas. And this will obviously need support to provide appropriate training and capacity building for that to go ahead. And also, as I mentioned before, we need to somehow align the economics with the environmental benefits. And to do this, we need a recognition of the positive contribution of anaerobic digestion to meeting the SDGs, the Paris Agreement, and other international commitments. And this also includes familiarizing finance institutions with the benefits of biogas, which is significant for facilitating investments. And finally, I just want to discuss the importance of understanding and taking into account the social context when it comes to developing biogas, which is something that kept coming up during our research. Obviously, as with any project, biogas must be a socially appropriate option for it to succeed, and projects fail when they don't take into account the social embeddedness of technology. This includes understanding the energy that's replaced, the way the energy is used, the capacity, the time available, all of these different factors. And it really underlines the importance of feasibility studies that look at all of available renewable energy options, and that also include a really strong stakeholder consultation and active participation of the people who will benefit from the technology, really to ensure that it's an appropriate option for the specific context in where it's being considered. So that's just a very brief overview of the research. Thanks very much. I'm really looking forward to hearing your questions and your comments. Please put them in the chat for later on, and I'll pass back to Michaela. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Connie, for this very good overview that really reflects also the amount of work that we've spent, and you specifically spent on the collection of information, data, and feedback surveys on the 3 regions for the report that was developed, and you focused on a couple of regions specifically. And allow me also to mention that, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is the first of a series of webinars on biogas, and the next one will be next week on the 3rd of June, and will be focused on Africa, which was another region together with Latin America that Connie went a little bit into some details. But now let's go from global, regional, just to national. And I would very much like to invite Oscar Ivan Galvis Mora. Oscar is the focal point of the mines and energy sector within the Colombian strategy for low carbon, adapted and resilient development. And Oscar, together with Ana Maria Mayano, coordinator of the Bioenergy Community of Practice of LAC, will give us an overview of the opportunities and challenges for biogas in Colombia. Oscar, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Can you tell me if you're seeing my screen?
We see your screen and we hear you well. Please,
Perfect.
Go ahead.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
Perfect. So first of all, thank you so much for the opportunity. It's a great opportunity for us to share all the experience that we have developed in Colombia right now after a few months of work, hard work with LAC, and that, of course, Ana Maria will tell you a little bit later. So our presentation will contain 2 parts. The first part is like an overview of the biogas usage in Colombia within the technical and the political context. And after that, we're going to tell you about all the consultancy that we develop related to the barriers of policy and technical barriers to implement biogas in Colombia. So first of all, I want to share, I mean, the political context in Colombia related to our national determined contribution to the Paris Agreement. That I don't know if you were aware of that, but our ambition is one of the highest ambitions in the world. We're committed to reduce in 51% our greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, sorry, 2030. And in comparison within the 2015, that was our first edition or first version of our NDC, with the newest that was launched, the submitted the last year. Of course, we have up-to-date information that it improved our methodology to quantify the emissions. We have, of course, specific actions related to those emissions. And of course, the good point is that right now we have specific stakeholders to like in the head of leading all these actions. Another important point is that we already have our first adaptation communication, and we are now submitting items related to means of implementation. So because of that, now we have a huge perspective of how we can work on all these climate change issues. Within, of course, the use of biogas and biofuels are starting to grow importance on the national policy. Within, for example, here in the lower left part of the slide, you can see some elements that now we're considering to fulfill of our objectives to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, where you can see, of course, that we have, for example, circular economy. You can see that we have, of course, protection of water and biodiversity. That if you think about that, of course, it is a great opportunity to use biogas, residual organic wastes, in order to improve those elements. This is how biogas, we are seeing how biogas is entering to the game, just to name it that way. In addition, of course, we have a huge framework to manage climate change in Colombia. Our ministries, we must have an integral management climate change plan. And right now we have two of them totally developed, that are the Mines and Energy Plan and the Housing and Water and Sanitation Plan. And we have one that is almost done, that is related to the agricultural sector. As you can see there, here in this slide, I'm showing you how the biogas is taking into consideration how this element can be one of the main objectives or main strategies to fulfill our climate change ambitions. So for example, if you can see within the mines and energy sector, our main goal is to diversify our power matrix. Of course, one of the strategies is to include or increase the penetration of non-conventional renewable energy sources, where, of course, biogas is one of those strategies. For example, with the housing and water and sanitation sector, they are thinking on the amount of methane that comes for the landfills, of course, and the wastewaters, and of course, to manage those biogas amounts are one of the main objectives. And for example, of course, within the agricultural sector, all related to good practices in the agricultural sector are the main objective, where of course the use of organic wastes is one of the main strategies. As you say, I'm working specifically with the mines and energy sector, so I will try to make a focus on how the government is working on this specific issue. So first of all, it's necessary to understand how is the energy consumption in Colombia. So here you can see in the picture that almost 40% of our energy is used by transportation, followed by industry and housing. And if you go to deep and understand how is this energy divided, you can see that almost 39% are related to fossil fuels, where you can see 21% is diesel and the 18% is fuel. So of course, there is a huge opportunity to change those percentages using a different fuel, as for example, the biofuels. So because of that, the Colombian government just launched last year a mission that we called the Energetic Transformation Mission, that is looking how we can shift for this kind of economy that we have right now to a low emissions or zero emissions economy. Of course, taking into account all the new scientific developments and all the great opportunities that right now we're understanding. Here in the left, in the right part, you can see like the 5 pillars of this mission, where the first one is related to enhance and improve the competitiveness, the participation, and the power of the market structure. What we're looking for here is to, of course, to increase the penetration of non-conventional renewable energy sources, where again is the huge opportunity to implement all the biogas and biofuel strategies to fulfill and maybe to shift and to replace the normal fuels that we're using right now. Of course, this is a mission that has a time frame of almost 20 years. So we're thinking that in 2015, Colombia has to be carbon neutral. So let's see if we can do it. The next slide, of course, is a lot of information that you can read here in this slide. But something that I want to tell you here is that because of this mission, Colombia just launched last year an energetic plan, national plan, towards 2020 and 2015. What we have here is 4 different scenarios, depending on the economical growth. We tried to model how the offer and how the demand of energetic will change toward this time. And what you can see here specifically is that even that the economical growth is not growing like with the huge numbers. You can see it here is just 3.1 until 3.5. What we have here is that in different scenarios, all the time we have, for example, look here, related to the demand, we're talking about biofuels and biogas. It means that those elements start to be important on the energetic metrics in Colombia. Just in the offer, including, of course, for example, the non-conventional renewable energy sources. Or if you think about the demand of energy, of course, we're thinking on how the gas will start penetrating, for example, in massive transportation systems in Colombia, or even in the industry sector in Colombia. So this is how within the Colombian policy, we're understanding these non-conventional renewable energy sources can be one of the main strategies to work on towards our climate change ambition. Of course, after that, we're just facing a lot of barriers, a lot of technical issues that maybe we are just noticing what is going on with those topics here in Colombia. So that's why we developed this consultancy. So after this point, I leave the floor to Ana Maria. So please, you can continue with explaining to the people or all the results of the consultancy.
Thank you very much, Oscar, and thank you to Connie and Michaela for the invitation to share the results of this study. I would like to first say a word about the Latin American and Caribbean Bioenergy Community of Practice. This is a peer-to-peer learning network launched in 2016 by the Secretariats of LAC and the Energy Working Group, which are both part of the LED's Global Partner. We bring together experts from different countries and sectors to share experiences, build capacities, and collaborate to promote and aid the development of policy frameworks, tools, and business models for sustainable energy investments in Latin America and the Caribbean. And this study that we are presenting today is part of the support that we provide to our members, facilitating technical assistance especially from the Energy Working Group and GBEP's Climate Help Desk. Next, please. Last year, at the request of the Colombian Low Carbon Resilient and Adapted Development Strategy, that they are members of the community of practice, we facilitated a technical assistance from the Climate Help Desk to develop a roadmap for a biogas NAMA. And later in the year, we agreed with the colleagues at the Colombian strategy to complement this assistance with the development and piloting of a methodology to provide inputs for policy making based on the experience of project development. That's why we call it practice to policy. It was decided to focus the analysis on biogas from residual biomass resulting from agriculture, livestock, and agro-industry, given that the residential solid waste and wastewater are considered in another NAMA that focuses on waste management. Next, please. Before presenting the methodology and results, I would like to very quickly acknowledge that this has been a team effort involving budgets and expertise from LAC, operated by Libellula, the Energy Working Group led by SD Strategies from Germany, the LSGP Climate Help Desk, operated by GIZ, our local consultant, Sofia Duarte, who has done the field work in Colombia, and the colleagues at the Colombian Low Carbon Resilient and Adaptive Development Strategy. Also, next, we would like to thank the contributions from many Colombian persons and organizations that have provided information, expert opinion, comments, and other support for the development of this study. I'm not going to read them all, but I would really like to thank them all on behalf of the team. Next. As mentioned before, our approach, please, can you click the whole, our approach for this study intends to provide inputs for policy making based on the field experience of developers who have invested in biogas projects in the country, and even from those who have tried and couldn't. This bottom-up approach complements the usual and useful inputs from international expertise and experience. Can you click? Yes, that's it. So we are complementing the bottom-up approach, the learnings from the international experience. Next. Logically, to do that, to learn from experience, we needed to start by identifying the projects already developed in the country. The information collected was used to build a map, which was the first product of the study, and that will be loaded onto a government server to be used and updated in the future. Unfortunately, we don't have time to show you the map in detail, but you will find the link to the current draft in the copy of the presentation that will be made available after this webinar. Next. Our methodology adapted a tool developed by UNDP for other renewable energy technologies to have a systematic understanding of all potential barriers, and complemented it with surveys and interviews to collect lessons learned from the developers and other actors' practical experience to understand which barriers are the most important in the country. Given the time limitation today, I will provide just an overview of the methodology because we would like to focus on the results. Next, please. We have several stages in the methodology. First, we built a table of potential risk barriers and policy measures based on the UNDP's de-risking renewable energy investments methodology. The team at SD Strategies did an extensive research of available studies on biogas investments to identify potential risk and associated barriers. At this stage, we built a table with 41 potential barriers. In a second stage, we had working sessions with experts from the Ministry of Energy, the Colombian Low Emission Development Strategy, the Colombian academic sector, to discuss which of the barriers are present in the country and give scores to them based on how important they are. In this process, we pre-selected 19 barriers that then were included in a survey instrument that was filled by representatives of companies and producer organizations with experience in biogas project development. They also were asked to score the barriers, and at the end we analyzed the results and found that 18 of the 19 pre-selected barriers were considered important with different levels of importance by the project developers. Next, please. After ranking doing this statistical analysis, we went and talked to other actors that are related to the barriers, for example, regulators, grid operators, financial institutions, to really understand what was behind the perceived barriers and the actual situation from the other point of view. And we had a workshop with government experts from different sectors to present and discuss the prioritized barriers and get their inputs also. And finally, once we had identified the main barriers, we did an analysis of the applicability, potential policy measures to the Colombian context, and developed specific recommendations. A few weeks ago, I had a workshop to discuss the proposed measures, and we are now preparing the final report. Next, please. So I'm not going to, in the next 3 slides, I will show the barriers grouped by level of importance. For time reasons, I will only discuss the ones in the top tier, commenting also on the findings of the validation exercise. And this is very coincidentally with, and not a coincidence, but the same as the results that Connie presented. The main barrier perceived by the developers is the high investment cost. And there is a common perception, not only in the developers, that these costs are not only high, but cannot be recovered by the operation. On the validation stage, we found that in Colombia, there are policy instruments in place aimed at addressing this barrier already, for example, tax exemptions. However, potential biogas project developers are not always aware of their existence. Also, many potential investors only analyze the possibility of recovering their investment with the income or avoided costs related to the energy production, while the experience shows that a positive financial equation for biogas projects required to take into consideration all potential revenues and avoided costs along the value chain, from those related to waste management to the use of byproducts. And talking about byproducts, I would like to refer to the third barrier, and it is the fact that currently in Colombia, there is no clear perspective, or we can say now there is a negative perspective about the possibility of obtaining revenue or avoiding costs by selling or using the register due to the lack of regulation or using it as fertilizer. Regarding the second barriers, and as Connie already mentioned also, developers and other actors see an important obstacle to their investments in the limited experience with biogas projects on the part of financial organizations. Finally, there is a perception that the grid interconnection requirements are unnecessarily stringent and or that there is some level of discretion by the grid operator. Taking this situation with regulators and grid companies, we found that the rules are based on technical issues and that they apply to all operators. However, project developers are not aware of all the regulations and requirements from the beginning, and they feel that at each step they find new rules. Next, please. The second group, which I'm not going to go in detail, include levels related to bureaucracy, barriers, related to bureaucracy, to operation and operation costs, the quality, availability of equipment, technical rules, having trained staff for the plant operation, lack of information, and macroeconomic uncertainty. Next. Also, there is a group of barriers that are perceived as existing but less significant, including availability of land, social acceptance of biogas projects, and also several barriers related to the management of residual biomass. Please, next. I would like to share with you 4 key findings. First is that the country has already a framework of environmental and energy policy instruments that could foster the development of biogas, but the dispersion makes it very difficult for potential biogas project developers, who are not usually energy developers, to know them and apply them. Also, that there is one important issue where the policies and regulations are required, and this is the use and trade of digestate. Also, that we found that there are in the country financial resources, financial instruments for that could be applied for biogas projects, but it is necessary to strengthen capacities, both in developers and financiers, to have more bankable projects. And finally, that it is clear that knowledge management and capacity building are key to lower barriers perceived by actual or potential biogas developers. Next, please. Regarding the recommendations, I'm not going to go in detail. Next, please. Just to say, and this is, I think, very consistent with what Connie mentioned before, our first recommendation is related to the coherence and coordination of different policy areas. There is a need to build on current effort, strengthening the existing biogas interinstitutional table, having a national biogas program that systematizes all current efforts, and continue with the preparation of the biogas NAMA. Also, it is important that the current political will and the efforts made by different government institutions to promote biogas are made more visible in their planning instruments and policy goals. Other recommendations have to do with knowledge management, improving administrative processes. This next. Capacity building, promoting the energy use of residual biomass, regulation and promoting the use of digestate as fertilizer, promoting research and development and technology adaptation, and technology and supply. Next. Next. I know we are running out of time, so I just want to share from the team 2 important takeaways. One is that this methodology that we applied allowed us to consider a very wide range of potential risks and barriers based on international best practice, but to focus policy recommendations on those that are more relevant for the developers in the national context. And second, that these recommendations must be considered as the starting point for a systematic, concerted policy efforts. That dispersed interventions may not have the desired impact as if they are considered part of a national program, of a national effort with policymakers from different areas acting in a coherent and coordinated manner. So thank you very much for your attention, and we hope we have time to discuss some of these findings.
Thank you so much, Oscar and Ana Maria, for your very wide and detailed presentation. I've seen also an initial exchange of comments and consideration in the chat, and in order to allow for a Q&A session, I would like to give the floor to Connie to moderate this exchange of views. Connie, over to you.
Thanks very much, Michaela. Yeah, just to mirror what you've just said, thank you really a lot for this presentation. It was a really interesting piece of research with some great methodology, and I hope that you'll be able to share the link to the report so that we can. I know that I would like to read it, and I'm sure that students would like to see it as well. So I hope that will be available to do shortly. So first, I'd just like to look at some of the questions that we saw in the chat box at the beginning of this Q&A session, and then I would also like to leave the floor. I know there are some comments already from some participants, some raised hands, and I would also like to leave the floor also to our colleague from Red LAC, Mariela, to talk a little bit about some of the work in Chile. So I see here that there was some questions on one specifically for myself on solutions for high capital costs and how we could address those. And I know that although it was addressed to me, I know that Ana Maria, you also touched on those. Specifically from our point of view, I know Ana Maria already touched on some of these solutions. For example, tax exemptions for imports of materials for the anaerobic digesters, but also creating these local value chains, as I discussed, which also reduces the costs of construction and the high initial costs. And also, as Ana Maria mentioned, creating value across the whole value chain, for example, also in terms of the market for the byproducts, the digestate, can also help to recuperate some of those high initial costs and make the bio more attractive as an investment. I don't know whether Ana Maria, you also wanted to touch on any of those points. I know that there's also another question in the chat which maybe you could contribute to, which is, what is your view on incentives at the domestic level to increase uptake of the technology? Can you give some examples of these incentives? It's a very, very similar question. I wonder whether you could touch on that, Ana Maria.
Yes, thank you. Yes, we found, as you mentioned in the research review, all these potential measures to address the topic of the high cost of investment. Some of them are tax exemptions, and we found that in Colombia there are already tax exemptions for renewable energy developers. There is also tax exemptions for carbon neutral activities, for example. But what we found is that sometimes project developers who are not, let's say, traditional energy developers, they are usually entrepreneurs from the agricultural sector or the the agro-industrial sector. They are not sometimes aware of these existing incentives. And also the other point is that very rarely you will recover your investment only from the energy value. You have to consider the avoided cost of waste management, for example. And this is especially in countries where there are very stringent, and you mentioned it also, Connie, environmental regulations. If companies have to pay for waste management, then they will have, they have to consider in their value chain this avoided cost when in their financial equation, this avoided cost of waste management. And also, being able to sell the digestate also contributes to finding this value along the chain. So I think it's very consistent what we have found with what you have said. And the countries in Latin America at least have advanced a lot in promoting other forms of renewable energy. So it is important to see what incentives already exist for renewable energy that can be applied to biogas.
Thanks, Ana Maria. That was very interesting what you said, and I agree. I agree completely. And I think it also leads into what I was also saying about the fact of a feasibility study in the local context, taking into account all of these different options along the value chain. So the avoided costs for paying for waste disposal, the increased income potentially from the energy generated, but also from the digestate, and then also some investment options, for example, thinking about carbon markets, and also other options for financing, especially at the small scale, for example, from microfinancing. So I would like to now give the floor to Mariela Pino from Red BioLAC, as I know that she had some on the presentations and also discuss a little bit of the her experience in Chile, and anyone else who would like to. We have a few more minutes after she will have spoken, so if you have any more questions or you would like to just raise your hand and speak, then please do that while she's speaking. Mariela, if you unmute your microphone, you should be able to speak.
Yep. Hi, Connie. Can you listen to me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Cool. Great. Thanks for inviting me. As you said, I am part of the coordination team of the Latin American Biogas Network, a network of advocacy and practitioners who come together in order to raise up, to build capacity and to exchange and generate knowledge from Latin America, indeed. So thanks for letting me the place to share and agree actually with all of your presentations. It has been quite interesting to listen from you to actually agree on all of the benefits and the work we have ahead. And actually, as you mentioned, Ana Maria and Ivan and Connie, there's a lot of things that will produce a proper environment. So if we really want to go for anaerobic digestion, we can have all of those benefits and more. So I just wanted to highlight what just happened in Chile in the last 2 years in terms of the municipal organic waste. There is now a national strategy. It's focused on the next 2 decades. So it's started in 2020 and it's going to be working until 2040. And the idea there is to reach higher and higher recovery of organic waste. At the moment, we have in our household waste around 58%, 58% of the weight in only organic waste. Yeah, this is the humid waste we all know from our kitchens and dishes, which at the moment it's only 1% being recovered through mostly composting. Yeah. So the idea is to reach in 20 years, 2/3, so 66% of those organic waste streams to be recovered. Yeah, this is great. This is providing, of course, a lot of expectations and hope. You know, however, at the middle term set of indicators, there it's only focus on composting. There are, of course, indicators such as composting at home, composting at schools, and also urban parks. However, there aren't, despite a long-term discussion, we were a team of 50 people around coming together when it was possible to sit together and discuss about how we're going to face this strategy. And of course, we discuss and we talk about anaerobic digestion. However, they aren't in the indicators. Well, we have to be positive and we have to see the positive half of it. And of course, this is already giving path and making the people understand that we don't have to mix the dry and the wet waste of our houses. And this is, of course, one step ahead. which is going to give the possibility to really recover organic waste, because as you said, we have in one hand the nutrients recycling, which is crucial for our food security and for our soil conservation and to avoid erosion and so on, and also to dismiss the synthetic fertilizers. But on the other hand, there is a lot of discussion in Latin America regarding energy production. We have a lot of sacrifice zones now because of carbon and because of other technologies which are not so clean. But we have at hand a very clean and circular technology, which is anaerobic digestion. So just to conclude, I would like to highlight that we as professionals and practitioners working in anaerobic digestion, I think this is a call for not mixing anaerobic digestion under the whole umbrella of alternative renewable energy, because if we compare anaerobic digestion with solar or wind, we will always have a loser, you know, no, it's too expensive, no, it's too difficult. But of course, anaerobic digestion, it is by itself a waste treatment method. It's not a generation of electricity. As a by-side and as a byproduct, it produces biogas, which is quite versatile and it's great. Actually, in Santiago, we have 2 huge wastewater treatment plants, which produce electricity and produce almost natural gas, you know, biomethane, and it's sold to the people. So I would like to focus on that first point, and also to think that in this municipality strategy, which is being just launched in Chile, we should also consider, and this is a lesson learned because of the dairy project, which I was involved in a few years ago. And the conclusion is that if you mix municipal solid organic waste with, when you have it at hand and when it's possible, with dairy waste, with food and beverage waste, you can boost the biogas production and you can multiply the benefits. And last but not least, I think we have to also count on the necessity that we have for creating new jobs and improve the competences. We have in Chile at least 70 plants, biogas plants, at different substrates waste being treated, and this is possible. We have to just boost with all of the resources available, the development of this technology as it was done in Chile with solar and with wind. Otherwise, this is never going to raise up. This is my conclusion on the state of the art. And just to finish, I also would like to invite the people from Latin America to share their work. We have a call of articles for our magazine, because it's quite important to demonstrate that anaerobic digestion is going on in Latin America, that we have a lot of learning processes, but it's possible and we will make it bigger.
Thanks very, very much, Mariela, for that really important information there. I find it really, really interesting, all your experience, especially specifically in Chile. I don't see any hands raised or any more questions in the chat, but if people would like to stay 5 minutes, I would actually have one last question, which would go both to Oscar and Ana Maria and also Mariela, because you talk, obviously, Mariela, you talked about the way forward in Chile in terms of the collection of the municipal solid waste, but how that anaerobic digestion at the moment is not specifically considered. And also, Oscar, you mentioned that, you know, anaerobic digestion has to have a place, biogas has to have a place in many of the strategies, but I wondered what you think concretely in Colombia and Chile is needed now, and what the way forward is for that. I wonder whether you're able to say something about that before we finish.
Mariela, I don't know if you want to start or should I?
Yeah, I was waiting.
Okay.
But well, for sure, what it's needed, it's actually mentioned in this strategy. You can find it at the Ministry of Environment website. The whole document, it's in Spanish, of course, but there it's mentioned. We need new rules and incentives. We need more environmental education. We need to reach the public, the citizens, to attract them and to make them understand why this is being needed. And of course, the most, the key topic, I think, it's to work with the municipalities. We need to teach, we have to understand together, and we have to make some specific research of what is the need of the municipality, what are their potentials, but also we have to make a parallel work with creating competences. We have to boost the possibility of teaching, of introducing the topic at the universities, at schools, agricultural schools, and so on, so that we can have the necessary human capacities at hand when it comes to installing those biogas plants. A biogas plant, as you know, it involves mechanical, electrical, chemical issues. So it's a study that involves many topics, and it's very important to improve that area together with the norms. We need to restructure the sanitary regulations, the environmental evaluations, and the land use planning, which has been at the moment the restrictions which haven't really helped into implementing biogas plants in Chile. So, for instance, as Connie mentioned, the carrot focus would be also to, for instance, create certification of products and to introduce the mechanisms at the grid, so that the electricity can be sold and the prices can also be lowered, and also at the natural grids and networks, that citizens would be translated the different prices of their biogas bills at the end of the month, because they are segregating at source their waste, would be a huge incentive. But we have to go strong on pushing and boosting, of course, by investing money and resources and a long-term planning. As Ana Maria said, we have to work on central ideas and not isolated projects, which has been quite necessary and relevant because they demonstrate the feasibility, but we have to work all together, hand by hand, with ministries and education, citizens, foundations, and of course, public civil society. That's what I would say.
Great, Mariela. Actually, I think that it's almost the same in Colombia, Here we have, I think that we must work in two different dimensions. The first one, of course, is regulation. We need to improve our regulation and our technical rules to facilitate these kind of projects within the rural areas or the farmers. Not just to the great agro industries, but just for a farmer that has some areas that he has a little bit of organic waste and he wants to use it, but he doesn't know how. Just to recall, one thing that Ana Maria was telling before is that, for example, the Mines and Energy Ministry, we have a specific fund that we can help to invest in the capex of projects. So of course, everybody can say, okay, with that everything is done, but the problem is that the farmer, they don't know how to show the project. So they just have an initial idea, and they're just going to the ministry, say, okay, this is my idea, I want to work on this. And of course the ministry say, okay, if you want to work on that, you need a more robust concept note, a structured project, in order that I can give you the money or give you the help. So this is the first part that we have to work in order to reduce all these requirements to construct or to build this kind of projects. And the other one, of course, according to Mariela, that I'm totally agree, is to build capacities, not just on how to use solid wastes or how to use anaerobic digestion, not just because of that, because of course everybody can find this kind of information, but just to how to build a project, how to identify the benefits, not their own benefits, but the benefits that they can give to the, for example, to the energy grid, for example, for the power grid, in order that to make them understand that their project is not just one issue that they can solve, but they can contribute to the national ambition, in our case, to our mission to diversify our energetic matrix. So I think that we have to work on that. And of course, it's in a step-by-step process. As Ana Maria said in one of the key findings, this is the consultancy that we develop must be considered at the starting point of a process. So right now we understood what are those barriers. Now we know in which barrier we must focus at the beginning in order to open that door, and after that we can start working, you know, to improve and to accelerating the penetration of biogas in the matrix. So I think that those are the two dimensions that we have to work on that.
And if I may, Connie, I would like to point out something that Mariela mentioned, which is very important, that anaerobic digestion is not only an energy issue. And I think that's an advantage, of course, and it's a challenge for policy making that we have to consider. It's not something that depends as many of the renewable energy technologies only from the Ministry of Energy. This has to do with environmental policy and regulation, with agricultural policy, with municipal strategies and work. So what you really need is, and that's why we put it first in our recommendations, to have a systematic, concerted, coherent policy effort. Because we see in the region, and this is one of the reasons we bring together in the community of practice people from many areas of policy. You know, we see efforts in the region that are dispersed. As Mariela said, we have projects everywhere. We have success stories. We also have a lot of projects that have not been able to succeed. And we need to go from those, let's say, dispersed initiatives to these national efforts that bring together and coordinate all these areas of policy and work with all the relevant actors to be able to obtain all the benefits of biogas. And as Oscar mentioned, in Colombia, the fact that the country has this very high climate ambition, and this has required all ministries to come up with ways to meet their goals. You know, this opening an opportunity, and he mentioned it, from the Ministry of Housing, from the Ministry of Agriculture, from the Ministry of Energy, to look at the potential of biogas. So I think, you know, we need to take advantage of this opportunity to have this integral, holistic policy view of biogas.
Thanks so much, Ana Maria. Thank you very much for this. I know we've gone a little bit over time. Thank you very much for those people who have been able to stay with us right until the end. But I think it was really important and interesting for us to have this discussion to really understand the conclusions and also some of the recommendations from the research that we've seen. So as I mentioned before, all of the presentations and the recording will be made available to all participants after the webinar, and we'll also be having the recording with subtitles in Spanish for the Latin American colleagues who maybe don't speak English. So with that, I'd like to thank you to the panelists, Oscar, Ana Maria, and also to Michela for introducing the session, and also to Mariela for her for her intervention in the discussion, and also to all participants. And I hope you'll be able to join us for our webinar next week, focused on the African region. So thank you very much again, and I hope you all have a very good rest of the day. Thanks and goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.